In this week's video, will we be discussing the most evil of them all? You're gonna have to wait and find out. Hello everybody, Nicky Marra here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you've all had a fabulous week and are ready for yet another fun ranking video. And while the majority of my channel is Disney themed, we are no strangers to the sister company, Pixar. On the channel before, we have discussed Pixar's animated films. We have ranked over, I want to say 70 Pixar characters between a part 1 and part 2 video, as well as all of the animated Pixar shorts. And while you all know I love to discuss an iconic Disney villain, we have yet to create a video specifically for all of the Pixar baddies. I truly mean it when I say the Pixar villains are some of the most evil and scary characters that have ever come from the Disney company. Between drawing from real-life messages, having insanely creepy designs, and overall just being a massive obstacle for all of our hero characters to overcome, Pixar knows how to create an iconic villain. And so today, friends, we are going to take a walk through Pixar history, and we are going to rank my top 20 favorite Pixar villains of all time. But if you're new to the channel, hi, my name is Nicky Marra and I am a Disney content creator. I got my start over on TikTok, but have joined the YouTube community and have been loving making long-form videos for you guys, of which I have brand new videos coming out every single Friday at 5 p.m. here on the channel. So if you haven't already, make sure to hit subscribe down below so that way you never miss out on any future magic from me. And likewise, if you would like to find me on any of my other social media platforms, then you can find me at Nicky Marra with 2 Y's and 2 R's. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat for even more magic beyond just here on the channel. Now, as always, with all of my videos, I do have some brief disclaimers, conditions, and then talking points that we're going to be sure to touch on for each individual villain on today's list. I have all of those categories timestamped down in the description box, but if you would just like to jump right into our ranking video today, then you could head right to this timestamp. First and foremost, for our disclaimers, I am not associated with the Walt Disney Company or the Pixar Company, and therefore I do not speak for the brand or the company, and any and all opinions in this video are just my own and do not reflect those of the brand or the company. But secondly, I welcome any and all opinions surrounding these iconic Pixar villains down in our comments section. Again, I know my list is going to look significantly different than anybody else's out there, so I more than welcome you to leave all of your thoughts and opinions on my list down in the comments, as well as leaving me your favorites down in the comments. But thirdly, for the disclaimers, I do want to give a brief spoiler warning for all of the Pixar villains that we are going to be talking about in today's video. Just in case I do end up spoiling something for you, I did want to give you a brief spoiler warning, so if I happen to be talking about an animated Pixar film or a Pixar character that you don't want anything spoiled for, then I more than welcome you to just jump on up to the next number on today's list. But next, friends, for our conditions for today's list. In order to be included on today's list, these characters must be the main antagonist of an original Pixar film. However, they can also come from a sequel film. In addition, they can't really have any moral gray area as to whether or not they could be villain or hero, and we're also not going to have a ton of Pixar villain sidekicks on today's list. It's really going to be the main antagonist from each film. But in all honesty, that's kind of it for our conditions for today's list, although I will say we are going to be limiting today's list to just 20 characters, as I really want to be able to dive in deep into each and every one of these villains, as they are so evil, so menacing, and I got a lot to say on each one. But friends, that just about wraps up our disclaimers and conditions for today's list. So very quickly, before we get into ranking some of Pixar's most iconic villains, let's go through the brief talking points that we are going to be sure to touch on for each character on today's list. After first identifying the Pixar villain at each number on today's list, we are going to be talking about the animated Pixar film from which they can be found, as well as its release year. We are next going to give a physical description of the character, as Pixar has a wide range of creatures that appear in their animated films, so whether this villain happens to be a human, a superhero, a car, a bug, a monster, we are going to be sure to identify what exactly this Pixar villain is physically. Next, we are going to be giving a brief description of their personality. So what character traits can we really see at the forefront of this character's appearance in their animated film? Next, we're going to be giving a description of the arc that this Pixar villain goes through in their animated film, as some villains can come around at the end and have some sort of redeeming quality, although some actually start off with a redeeming quality and then eventually turn evil. So we're gonna have to go through that entire arc for each character. And finally, for the fifth talking point, we are going to be discussing their impact on the Walt Disney Company and the Pixar Animation Studios. We're gonna discuss whether or not they appear only in their animated film and don't really make an impact outside of it, or whether or not they are fully integrated into the Disney parks and can be met, or just how they appear outside of their animated film, if they do at all. But with all of that, friends, I believe it is finally time to jump into today's evil ranking list. So if you are ready to jump into today's list, then sit back, relax, grab yourself a snack and a drink, and let's rank Pixar's animated villains. We are starting today's list all the way down at the bottom at number 20, who is the character Randall Boggs. Now, for any of you who happen to see my ranking of my 15 least favorite Disney characters of all time, then this will not come as much of a surprise. And spoiler alert, neither will number 19 on today's list. Now, Randall Boggs, of course, comes from the 2001 Pixar animated film, Monsters, Inc., although he can also be seen in the 2013 Pixar film, Monsters University. As for a physical description of this Pixar villain, he is a purple lizard-like monster with chameleon powers, being able to change color and even turn invisible. He has multiple legs in his character design, and when he's at university, in Monsters University, he also wears glasses. As for his personality in his animated films, he is rather sneaky, ambitious, he is constantly jealous of Sully's successes, and also plots ruthless schemes. As for the character arc that Randall Boggs experiences across his two animated films, in Monsters University he is actually expelled from school. And eventually, spoiler alert, at the end of Monsters, Inc., he finds himself trapped in the human world as punishment for all of his evil schemes. And finally, as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, he is often featured in Monsters, Inc. merchandise. He can be seen in Mike and Sully to the Rescue, the iconic dark ride over in Disney's California Adventure, and he's also used in certain Halloween villain events at the Disney parks. Now, as I discussed in my ranking of my 15 least favorite characters, Randall Boggs' design is not one of my favorites. And the reason for this is, I'm not gonna lie, it's because I find his design very creepy. I think the way he moves and like slithers around different spaces just absolutely wigs me out, and I find myself not really enjoying his presence on screen. That's not to say he's a bad villain, it's to say he's not one of my personal favorites. To speak highly of this character, I think his evil scheming is actually really iconic to the Pixar canon. Randall Boggs looks and acts like a quintessential villain, and so I don't think he's an unsuccessful villain at all. I think he serves the role and the title very wonderfully. However, he just ranks at number 20 on my personal list because, in all honesty, he's really creepy and I don't really like to look at him. And it's the same reason that he ranked on my 15 least favorite characters. It's just, he's got that slippery, slimy quality about his character design and the way he moves, and I really just don't like watching him move around on screen. I completely and totally understand anybody that would place him super high up on their list because, again, he's a great villain. But I will say he's honestly not one of my personal favorites when it comes to the Pixar canon. So yes, I guess that goes to show you that being too creepy or too serpent-like will definitely land you a bottom position on a Nicky Marra ranking list. So I'm sorry to all of the Randall Boggs fans, and yeah, I'm gonna leave him down at number 20 on today's list. Sorry. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 19 on my list, and as I said before, another one of my least favorite characters of all time. At number 19 is the character Hopper. Again, another iconic Pixar villain that I just don't happen to gravitate towards. Now, Hopper, of course, comes from the 1998 Pixar animated classic, A Bug's Life. And as for a physical description of this Pixar villain, he is a tall, well, tall in terms of a bug, tall, muscular grasshopper with a brown body, blue eyes, and very intimidating posture. As for his personality, he is the brutal, tyrannical, and intelligent leader of the grasshoppers. And if one thing can be said about this character, he rules by instilling fear. And as for his overall character arc within his animated film, he honestly remains super villainous throughout the entire plot of this animated film, which honestly makes his ending in this animated film feels super justified. As spoiler alert for the ending, he is eventually defeated and fed to baby birds after losing control of the ant colony. But as for this Pixar villain's impact on the Walt Disney Company, well, he could previously be seen every single day over in It's Tough to Be a Bug, which happened to just close over in Disney's Animal Kingdom. But as of now, we only get to see rare appearances of him whenever some Bug's Life merchandise comes out, but in all honesty, that's not super often. So while he used to have a lot bigger impact in the Walt Disney Company, as of the release time of this video, we really can't see a whole lot of him. Now, as for why he ranks super far down on today's list, this Pixar villain also appeared in my ranking of 15 least favorite Disney characters of all time, and the main reason is that he is not particularly a villain that has any sort of likable qualities to him. Whereas we may look at some iconic Disney villains such as the Queen of Hearts, who is brash and over the top and very flamboyant. We may look at Jafar, who has some really crass humor. Or we can look at Ursula, who has some really over-the-top performance and a wonderful villain song, of which I also have an entire video ranking Disney villain songs, which I can link up above for you. Hopper, in my personal opinion, does not have any of those redeeming qualities. Whenever he's on screen, he is simply making life so difficult for every other character in his film, and while the same can be said for other villains, I don't even really like this character's design, and it honestly makes me wish we had a more over-the-top and like cartoonish look to him, so that way at least something about him was like attention-grabbing to the audience. Hopper, in my opinion, has no intriguing qualities other than the fact that he is just ruthless and mean, and for that reason, I definitely do not gravitate towards him. I either gravitate towards the villains that have a lot deeper emotion or have some enjoyable quality about them, something that really makes audiences love to hate them. In certain ways, it's kind of hard to describe, but Hopper's just not a character that I'm drawn to. To me, he's too over-simple in his overall design, and he kind of doesn't have any redeeming qualities or anything likable about him, to me, in my personal opinion. But if you happen to really like Hopper, please let me know why down in the comments. I think he is a really great villain, but just not one that I'm drawn to. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 18 on my list, another villain that kind of creeps me out. At number 18 is Henry J. Waternoose III. Yes, another Monsters, Inc. villain. I'm so sorry, they're just not really one of my favorites. Now, as we just said, Henry Waternoose, of course, can be found in the 2001 Pixar animated film, Monsters, Inc. And as for a physical description of this Pixar villain, he is a large monster with 6 legs, but he is equal parts mix of like crab and spider. He does have an overall round body and a white mustache, but overall you kind of look at him and he just gives you the creeps, just upon first glance. But as for his personality in his Pixar animated film, he does have a paternal facade which actually masks a rather ruthless business focus, even to the point of being desperate to save his company through unethical means. But as for his character arc in his animated film, he is eventually arrested at the end of his animated film after it is discovered that he had been kidnapping children. Another villain who is just absolutely hard with no likable qualities, in my own personal opinion. But as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, he, much like Randall Boggs, can be seen in Mike and Sully to the Rescue, although he can also be seen in certain merchandise, such as plush, pins, and certain villain figurine sets. Now, much like Hopper, I think this character has very few redeeming qualities. There's truly nothing likable about him, and there's nothing that ever makes you even feel invested to love to hate him. He kind of just appears on screen, is creepy, and then does a bunch of horrible things. And that's kind of it. Now, the one reason why I say he does rank above Hopper is that I think this character has a little bit more interesting of a character design. Don't get me wrong, it's still creepy, much like Randall Boggs, but at least there's that intense villainy on screen with a design that will creep you out. The bottom of this list really is just different amalgamations of the same descriptions. To me, Randall Boggs has a creepy design and not really strong motivations. Hopper has a kind of boring design and really strong motivations. And then Henry J. Waternoose III has a really creepy design and really bad intentions in his film. So he ranks above the other two that we've talked about so far, but still nowhere near one of my favorites. I'm not really a Henry J. Waternoose III fan. But with that being said, yet again, Pixar does a really great job at creating villains, and I totally understand why people would absolutely love him as a villain, because he's super evil. But friends, that is why he does rank towards the bottom of today's list with the other Pixar villains that we've talked about so far. But next, friends, we're going to move on up to number 17 on my list. Who is the villain? Thunderclap. Now, Thunderclap can be found in the 2015 animated Pixar film, The Good Dinosaur. And as for a physical description of this Pixar villain, and you are going to have to bear with me as I apologize, I am not a paleontologist. He is a large Nyctosaurus? Nyctosaurus? He almost kind of looks like a pterodon. Like he's a flying dinosaur. His picture's on the screen right now, you'll see what I mean. But he also does have some rather dark feathers on him. He has a white head and underbelly, and a long, sharp beak, which adds to his overall factor of creepiness. As for his personality within the film, he is rather predatory, aggressive, and merciless to a lot of the other animals in this Pixar film. And as for his character arc, he honestly has no redemption within his animated film. He simply remains a predator who is eventually defeated by Arlo and Butch's herd. And as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, it is very minimal. He is not particularly a popular villain character, although I will say he is sometimes featured in some Good Dinosaur figurine sets as merchandise. But considering The Good Dinosaur was overall not one of the most beloved Pixar animated films, Thunderclap kind of goes the wayside with that animated film. To be completely honest, I think Thunderclap serves the purpose for his animated film. He seems like the perfect villain that would fit this animated film, but overall, this just didn't turn out to be one of my favorite animated films. That being said, I do think he fit the bill quite nice for it. Likewise, he also doesn't have this overall creepy design, but I wouldn't also call his design boring. Similarly, I think he also serves as a great threat for our protagonists in this animated film. And even though he may not really impress me much, I do actually tend to like him a little bit more than any other character we've talked about on today's list. Still definitely nowhere near one of my favorite animated Pixar villains, but at least we're getting to a rather neutral area at this point on today's list. But with that, friends, we're going to move on up to number 16 on my list. Who is the Underminer? Now, the Underminer, of course, can be found in the ending of the 2004 Pixar animated film, The Incredibles, as well as in the opening of The Incredibles 2, which was released in the year 2018. As for a physical description of this Pixar villain, he is a short, stocky man with a miner's helmet, some fun goggles, and a very large drill machine. As for his personality, he is extremely boastful. He loves chaos and thievery, and he honestly appears as a villain trope parody. And as for his character arc, believe it or not, he actually escapes justice, which comedically leaves his fate kind of ambiguous to us as an audience. And as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, he is featured in certain Incredibles merchandise, including some Lego sets, the defunct Disney video game Disney Infinity, and he can also be seen in certain graphics around the Disney parks. Overall, I think the Underminer is kind of that perfect comedic villain where he's definitely not too threatening, as he really only appears for a short time in both of the films that he can be seen in. And even though he's not the main antagonist of both of those films, he is a Pixar villain that appears in 2 animated films. And honestly, I think he's kind of cool. We've never really seen another like comedic type villain like this from Pixar who's seemingly a throwaway villain, but what's interesting about him is that he has a lot of interesting motives that keep him reappearing within this series, and I wonder, when Incredibles 3 happens to roll around, if we are going to in fact see the Underminer yet again. He's a character that I don't necessarily think is going to be at the top of any Pixar villains lists, but I would be lying if I said I don't like him a lot more than every other character on today's list so far. And I guess we'll just have to see if my predictions come true when Incredibles 3 rolls around. Someday soon. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 15 on my list, who is Al McGuigan. Now, Al McGuigan, of course, comes from the 1999 Disney animated film, Toy Story 2. And as for a physical description of this Pixar villain, he is a human man with glasses. He has brown hair, although he is quite bald on top. And when he is doing his commercials for his toy shop, he wears a big chicken suit. As for his personality within his animated film, he is extremely greedy. In addition, he's also very impatient and obsessed with finding toys that he can sell for large amounts of money. As for his character arc, he is eventually thwarted at the end of his animated film when Buzz, Woody, and the gang all escape his clutches. And as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, I'm gonna be honest, it's not super big, seeing as even though he is the main antagonist of the second film, he realistically doesn't appear outside of his animated film. He does have a minor presence in like Toy Story 2 merchandise, as he can be seen in certain Toy Story villain sets. Toy Story has a lot of movies and it's got a lot of villains, so sometimes Al McGuigan is included. As for why he ranks at number 15, he's okay overall as an animated villain, definitely not one of my favorites, although I will say he is significantly more annoying than all the other characters on today's list, which actually does put him in the category of me loving to hate him, as he just seems like an absolute nuisance to all of the toys in this film. So yeah, even though he's nowhere near the top of today's list, he's one that I actually, dare I say, find some enjoyment from watching him on screen. And that may be because he is a goofy villain and finds a way to embarrass himself every single time he is on screen. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 14 on my list, who is the villain Evelyn Dever. Now, Evelyn Dever can be found in the 2018 Pixar animated film, The Incredibles 2. And as for a physical description of this villain, she is a rather slender woman with brown hair. She wears a black turtleneck in her film and honestly has some very angular features, very reminiscent of a lot of Pixar villains. As for her personality, she is intelligent, strategic, and cynical, and she harbors a deep resentment towards superheroes. How fitting for a villain of a superhero movie. And as for her character arc within the Incredibles sequel film, she's eventually exposed and arrested after trying to sabotage the superheroes' return to the public. But as for her impact on the Walt Disney Company, she does have some limited toy releases being included in some figure packs for The Incredibles 2, and she can be seen in some concept art displays over in Disney's Hollywood Studios, but besides that, she doesn't appear a whole lot outside of her original animated film. I think a big reason for this could be the fact that she is what's considered a twist villain. At the beginning of the film, she starts off seeming to be on the side of the heroes. However, eventually both her actions and her name, Evelyn Dever, like evil endeavor. Not my favorite name in the world, but you know, it's a anyways. And as we know, twist villains have become a general trope over the past couple of years, so she kind of just falls into this overall category. So yeah, she doesn't really get too much outside representation, and I don't think she's a bad villain, but definitely not amongst one of my favorites. Ooh, but next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 13 on my list, who is the villain Otto, or A-U-T-O, in all caps. Now, Otto, of course, comes from the 2008 Pixar animated film, WALL-E. And as for a physical description of this Pixar villain, Otto is a futuristic autopilot with a glowing red eye in the middle of its overall wheel. As for its personality, it is rather cold, logical, and programmed to follow, by and large, and all of the orders that it commands, including preventing humanity's return to Earth. For its overall character arc, eventually it is overthrown by Captain McCrae, although honestly throughout the film there is no personal growth on behalf of this Pixar villain, seeing as it has an overall like AI quality to it. And as for its impact on the Walt Disney Company, it's featured in some minor WALL-E merchandise from time to time, but overall, it definitely doesn't have a large park presence. Overall, I think Otto does serve as a very menacing villain in his animated film. I think there are a lot of really fun qualities to him and his unpredictable nature that really serves as an overall thwart to our animated heroes. And seeing as WALL-E is a robot that has human interests in mind and Otto is not, I think that really shows the duality between how machinery can both help and hurt humans. And to be very honest, the only thing that keeps this villain not in the top half of today's list is his character design. I really don't think there's anything super special about the character design, considering Otto is just supposed to be the commander of the ship, and he appears as a wheel, but more so the lack of presence is what this villain is supposed to be in his animated film. The next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 12 on my list, who is Stinky Pete, also known as the Prospector. Now, Stinky Pete can be found in the 1999 Disney animated film, Toy Story 2, and whereas Al McWiggin is the human antagonist, Stinky Pete actually serves as the toy antagonist for all of the toys in this animated film. Now, Stinky Pete, of course, comes from the 1999 Disney animated film, Toy Story 2, and as for a physical description of this character, he is a rather elderly prospector doll with a bushy white beard, a red shirt, some blue overalls, and a pickaxe, and the most important thing about him is he never actually comes outside his box. Well, not until the plot twist. As for his personality, he is rather grumpy, manipulative, bitter about never being sold, and focused on museum preservation. As for his character arc, he, much like Evil Endeavor, is also a twist villain, as it is later revealed that his intention is to gather the set of toys that he was originally released in and be brought to a museum for preservation. This, of course, counters Woody's desire to return to Andy, but Stinky Pete is eventually defeated by being taken by a Barbie doll, who happens to also be in a child's backpack. And as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, he can actually be more regularly seen in Toy Story merchandise, as well as there being brief references to him over in Toy Story Land in Disney's Hollywood Studios. Overall, in my personal opinion, I feel like this is the villain that currently has the most impact within the Walt Disney Company, as I can think of specific instances where you can see him in the parks. And although a rather menacing villain, I think he also does have some comedic points about him, especially when it comes to his resolution at the end of his animated film. But next, friends, we're going to move on up to number 11 on my list, who is the character Alpha. Now, Alpha, of course, comes from the 2009 Disney animated film, Up. And as for a physical description of this Pixar villain, he is a large Doberman. He wears a special collar around his neck which allows his thoughts to be delivered through speech, although his collar happens to be broken, so he has this really high-pitched voice. But overall, he has black and brown fur and a rather muscular build. Muscular build for a dog, I guess you could say. And as for his personality, he is extremely loyal to another character that we're going to be talking about a little bit later on today's list, who happens to be the main villain of the movie Up. But he also has a rather intimidating yet comedic voice, considering his collar is broken, and so we get to deal with a lot of silly character interactions within this animated film from Alpha. As for his character arc, he ends up losing his authority amongst his dog pack, as they end up laughing at his squeaky voice. And finally, for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, he does sometimes appear alongside the character Doug in Up merchandise and can rarely be seen in some promotional artwork around the Disney parks. Again, not too much representation from this Pixar villain outside of his original animated movie, but I do really like the comedic aspect of this character. I think this movie did a great job with balancing out his rather evil lines with a really high-pitched and squeaky comedic voice. And yeah, I think this is a really great character. Not quite enough to make it into the top half of today's list or my top 10, but just missed it by a hair. Ooh, but with that, friends, we have reached the top 10 of today's list. If you have any guesses as to which Pixar villains are going to rank in my top 10 and the top half of today's list, make sure to leave your guesses down in the comments. I'm excited to see if you can guess any of my Pixar villain favorites. But with that, friends, we are going to move into my top 10, starting off at number 10, who is Gabby Gabby. Now, Gabby Gabby, of course, can be seen in the 2019 Disney animated film, Toy Story 4. And as for a physical description of this animated villain, she is a vintage doll with strawberry blonde hair, a yellow polka-dotted dress, and a rather soft voice. As for her personality, she is initially manipulative, seeing as she is trying to get her hands on a voice box. But ultimately, she actually comes around in the end, turning into a rather compassionate figure. As for her character arc, she becomes redeemed at the end of her animated film, when she comforts a lost child. And likewise, through that, she ends up finding quite a loving home. And as for her impact on the Walt Disney Company, it is not too much outside of her original animated film, although she can be seen in some Toy Story 4 merchandise. I honestly really like Gabby Gabby. I think she was a fun switch up from a lot of the previous Toy Story villains, seeing as she does have this redeeming arc at the end. And even though she has a posse of other characters that are really, really creepy, she in of herself is not really the most scary villain, so when she comes around in the end, it really does seem like she actually has a true change of heart within her film. Yes, I like Gabby Gabby quite a bit. I think she is quite entertaining in her animated film, and I like that she's quite a bit deeper than a lot of the other villains that we've talked about so far on today's list. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 9 on my list, who is Chick Hicks. Now, Chick Hicks, of course, comes from the 2006 Pixar animated film, Cars. And as for a physical description of this Pixar villain, he is a green race car with a mustache-like grill, many sponsorship decals, and the number 86 painted on his side. As for his personality, he is arrogant, sneaky, and very unsportsmanship-like, seeing as he is obsessed with winning at all costs, even to the point of cheating. As for his overall character arc in his animated film, he does win the Piston Cup. However, he loses the respect of the racing community, ending his animated movie receiving lots of boos from the crowd. But as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, he can be seen featured in some Cars merchandise. Likewise, he's also made appearances in certain Cars video games that have been released, as well as having a brief appearance in the Radiator Springs Racers queue, as well as certain ride scenes. Overall, I think Chick Hicks is a really fun and different take on Pixar villain, seeing as he is really determined to just win at all costs, even to the point of hurting another racer. He is super nasty and not somebody you would want to play with at all, but that's what makes him such a likable villain, is that it is really easy to dislike him and root against him. I also like that color is used in his design very strategically, as he seems to be green with envy. But next, friends, we're going to move on up to number 8 on my list, who is the character Darla. Now, Darla, of course, can be found in the 2003 Pixar animated film, Finding Nemo. And as for a physical description of this character, she is a young girl with braces, some pigtails, a purple sweater, and some lovely headgear for her braces. As for her personality, she is hyperactive, oblivious, and unintentionally harmful to fish. Well, at least we think it's unintentionally. And as for her character arc, there is honestly no major character arc for her, seeing as she really only serves as a comedic, fear-inducing figure. Seeing as there is a rather comedic effect where she will walk into a room, only make a brief appearance, but have an iconic, psycho-like soundtrack accompany her. And as for her impact on the Walt Disney Company, there's a brief reference to her in the Finding Nemo Big Blue and Beyond musical, as well as a small reference to her in the Seas with Nemo and Friends queue. Overall, I think this one's just super funny, and she doesn't have a large presence in her animated film, but I really do like her. I think she's really funny and has a lot of great comedic effect within the plot of this animated film. But with that, friends, we're going to move on up to number 7 on my list, who is Sid Phillips. A lot of villainous children on today's list. I'm just noticing that now, but that's kind of fun. Now, Sid Phillips, of course, can be found in the 1995 Pixar animated classic, Toy Story. And as for a physical description of this character, he is a young boy with a buzz cut, braces, a skull t-shirt, and ripped jeans. As for his personality, he is very chaotic, incredibly destructive, and enjoys dismantling toys for experiments. How great was the writing of this film, where the toys are the main characters and the kid that destroys the toys is the main villain. That is pure genius. And as for his character arc, he is eventually terrified when all of the toys that he seemingly has tortured over the years turn on him, which hopefully implies that he ended up changing his ways later in life. But as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, it is believed that he actually makes another appearance later in Toy Story 3 as the Garbage Man, seeing as the Garbage Man also wears this like skull-like t-shirt that Sid wears in his original film. He is also iconically known as Pixar's first animated villain of all time, being equivalent to the Evil Queen from Disney's Snow White. And although he also does have some merchandise and references in Toy Story Land, what's really interesting about him is he has also appeared as a meet and greet character. Yes, Sid has appeared for some special ticketed events, and he is honestly just as much of a menace in his park presence as he was in his original animated feature. Sid is honestly a great villain for this Pixar animated film, and he definitely deserves his top 10 placement on today's list. But next, friends, we're gonna move on up to number 6 on my list, who is Lotso, also known as Lotso Hugging Bear. Now, Lotso, of course, can be seen in the 2010 Pixar animated film, Toy Story 3. And as for a physical description of this Pixar villain, he is a large pink plush bear with a strawberry scent about him, as well as white eyebrows and a white stomach. As for his personality, he appears cuddly and warm from the beginning, but is eventually revealed to be controlling, authoritarian, and vengeful after feeling abandoned. As for his character arc, he eventually chooses to not save the other toys, which ends up resulting in his disposal by a garbage man. And as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, he is extremely popular in both plush and pin merchandise. Likewise, he has been seen in the past as a walk-around character, and he is also heavily featured in Tokyo Disneyland's Toy Story Hotel decor. This Pixar villain is pure evil but comes with an extremely adorable appearance, and he comes with the overall warning to not judge appearances because, my gosh, would this just be an adorable plush, but he turns out to absolutely ruin lives in his animated film. I think he's an absolutely great villain, and in my opinion, there are just a few that are a little bit more iconic than him in his original animated film. Oh, but with that, friends, we are moving into the top 5 of today's list. I am so nervous. You are gonna have to let me know if you agree with my top 5. But yes, friends, next we're moving on up to number 5 on my list, who is the character Syndrome. Now, Syndrome, also previously known as Buddy Pine, could be found in the 2004 Pixar animated film, The Incredibles. As for a physical description, he is tall and pale with orange, spiky hair, and a black and white supersuit with the giant letter S across his chest. As for his personality, he is egotistical, bitter, yet also a genius inventor, and in his adult years has become obsessed with fame and recognition over Mr. Incredible. And as for his character arc, he starts off as a rejected fanboy for Mr. Incredible and eventually turns into a supervillain. And very poetically, he ends up meeting his own demise at the hand of his own hubris. And as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, he is widely used in Incredibles merchandise, as well as making an appearance in the now defunct Disney video game, Disney Infinity. And he's also featured on the Incredicoaster graphics found over in Disney's California Adventure theme park. Overall, I think Syndrome just immediately comes out as an iconic Pixar villain. I think he's one of the first ones you think of, in all honesty, because The Incredibles was such a famous franchise from Pixar. And with his giant orange spiky hair, like, he just immediately has an iconic character design, and I really think he has an awesome arc in his film too, going from a rejected fan to the eventual #1 hater on Mr. Incredible. Overall, so much depth, so much great character design, and he definitely deserves a top 5 placement on my personal list. But next, friends, we're moving on up to number 4 on my list, who is Emperor Zurg. Now, Emperor Zurg was initially introduced to the Toy Story franchise in 1999's Toy Story 2, although he also does have a cameo appearance in the 2010 Pixar film Toy Story 3, as well as the Pixar film Lightyear, which was released in the year 2022. As for a physical description, he is a tall, for a toy, purple robotic figure with red eyes, a black cape, a horned helmet, and a laser blaster. As for his personality, he is villainous, melodramatic, and a classic sci-fi parody villain. And he also claims to be Buzz Lightyear's father as an iconic nod to the supervillain Darth Vader from Star Wars. But as for his character arc, there honestly is no major arc for this character in Toy Story. But there is an iconic arc for him, I guess you could say, over in the film Lightyear, which I'm not going to spoil for you today, but that film also exists, and it creates an arc for him. But as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, he is a prominent character in the Disney attraction Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin, as well as Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters. He can be seen in a lot of Toy Story merchandise in the form of action figures, and is drawn into a lot of park appearances in a lot of different artwork around the Disney parks. I think Zurg is yet another villain that is just iconic to the Pixar franchise, and he really has cemented himself into Pixar history, to the point where I think a lot of people forget that he actually wasn't in the original Toy Story film. He just really sort of seems like a character that's always been around and just is immediately iconic, especially because of all of the parody material that he is given to the Star Wars franchise. Yes, I like this villain, and had to be included in my top 10. But next we're moving on up to number 3 on my list, who is Chef Skinner. Now, Chef Skinner can be found in the 2007 Pixar animated film, Ratatouille. And as for a physical description, he is a short, stocky man with a large nose, big bushy eyebrows, a chef's hat, and a white cook's uniform. As for his personality, he is greedy, paranoid, manipulative, and attempts to exploit Gusteau's name for frozen food line. And as for his eventual character arc, he is ousted as head chef after Linguini and Remy expose him, which eventually ends in his comedic failure. And as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, although he used to have a minor presence in the Disney parks, he now can be seen in Remy's Ratatouille Adventure, the main iconic attraction over at Disney's Epcot, as well as in certain merchandise such as pins and figurines for the Ratatouille film. Overall, Chef Skinner is a really great villain. I think he has a lot of really great moments of comedy, while also being a villain that really seems like a real-life character. Like, there is definitely that over-egotistical person that you know in your life, and it just matches up perfectly to Chef Skinner. Overall, no notes. I really like this villain, and there's only a couple of villains that beat him out for the top placements on today's list. Next, friends, we're going to move on up to number 2 on my list, and I don't know if a lot of you would guess that this one would rank super high for me, but at number 2 is Charles Muntz. Now, Charles Muntz comes from the 2009 animated Pixar film Up, and as for a physical description, he is a rather elderly man with white hair and mustache, but he has a tall stature, a rather rugged explorer outfit, gloves, and aviation goggles. As for his personality, he is charismatic and obsessive, as well as quite paranoid, seeing as he is initially idolized, but eventually becomes cruel in nature, even to the point of becoming murderous to protect what he believes is rightfully his. As for his character arc, he initially begins as a confidant to Carl, as well as Carl's hero, but is eventually revealed as villainous, and meets his demise trying to capture Kevin and her children. And as for his impact on the Walt Disney Company, he does appear on certain Up merchandise, but overall is not seen too often outside of his original Pixar film. I think a lot of people do write off Charles Muntz as a non-iconic villain, but I'm gonna be so completely honest, he is a villain that just exudes pure evil in his animated film. He may not appear super evil, seeing as he is a rather elderly man and doesn't seem like he can do a whole lot of evil, but from the second that he has his turning point in his animated film, he's honestly really scary. In my opinion, he probably is one of the most successful twist villains, and I think he honestly deserves a ton more credit for being an iconic Pixar villain. Charles Muntz is definitely a scary figure in his animated film, and I think we gotta give him a whole lot more credit for all of the evil that he brings to this iconic Pixar film. Oh, but with that, friends, we have reached number 1 on my list of favorite Pixar villains. Have you possibly guessed who it could be? Yes, friends, at number 1 on my list of favorite Pixar villains is Mor'du. Now, Mor'du comes from the iconic Pixar animated film Brave, which was released in the year 2012. And as for a physical description of this Pixar villain, he is a massive, monstrous bear with dark brown fur and torn up ears. He has numerous scars across his body and a prominent broken spear that is lodged into his back. For his personality, he is extremely ferocious, vengeful, and animalistic. with lingering human pride and rage, and he truly attacks anything that comes across his path. As for his character arc, which I honestly think is one of the most incredible across all of Pixar villains, he is a former prince consumed by his desire for power. He seeks out a way to become more powerful from a witch who eventually turns him into this monstrous bear. And he remains trapped until his final battle against Princess Merida, who in causing his demise actually frees him from his cursed bear form. I think this is such a unique story arc for a Pixar villain. I love how evil he is right from the start, even considering the fact that the lead-in to the title screen of this animated film is like, it gives me chills every single time. We also see Mor'du as a villain that follows Merida as she grows up. We see an initial interaction when Merida is very young, and eventually she must confront him again in her teenage years. I think his character design is absolutely perfect. He has an interesting backstory that also humanizes him. And I also love towards the end that we actually do see sort of a redemption arc for him, as when he turns into a Will-o'-the-Wisp, he actually does seem sort of regretful and mournful over the decisions he made in his life. But as for his impact, he can be seen featured in certain Brave merchandise. He's also featured in certain projection shows, and used to have certain imagery within Princess Merida's meet and greet area over in the Magic Kingdom. However, that has since been closed and turned into an Encanto area. Yes, overall, I really think Mor'du is such an incredible villain. He is monstrous in size, monstrous in personality, but has all of that deep complexity that I look for in a perfect Pixar villain. Whew. But with that, friends, we have discussed 20 of my favorite Pixar villains. Thank you so much for joining me today. I had so much fun discussing all of these iconic Pixar villains. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below so that way you never miss out on any future magic from me. Likewise, if you would like to find me on any of my other social medias, my handle is @Nicky Marra with 2 Y's and 2 R's. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat for even more magic. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. I really do love talking about all of Pixar's properties. I think there is so much depth and artistry put behind all of their work, and the same can be said for so many of their iconic Pixar villains. Again, as always on the channel, make sure to leave down in the description any certain topics that you might be interested in me discussing in the future on the channel. But with all of that, friends, I will say thank you so much for watching, stay magical, and until next week, I'll see you all real soon.